Good evening. I'm Caroline. I work for St. Vitus doing my marketing, social media, stuff like that. Whatever, that's not why you're here. You're here because I'm talking to Zohra Atash today. Zohra is from a whole bunch of bands. She was in Religious to Damn. You probably know her from Azar, Swan. She's also got some solo stuff coming up that we're going to talk about, which I'm really excited about. She's a writer. She's, just kind of all around crazy, gifted, interesting, awesome. So I'm really excited to talk to her. I'm going to see if I can get her account to join. It's always a moment. While you're waiting, there is also like a question function down there that if you're wondering if like a comment gets buried or something, you can put it in a question and it actually like stores it for later. So yes, there we go.
Hi, how are you? Oh, it's good to see
Good,
you.
how are you? Likewise. Thank you so much for doing this.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Just because I had to kind of rejigger. The lighting situation changed like in the last 15 minutes and then my cat just jumped on top of the tables and messed up my little makeshift situation. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm all right, hanging in there.
Nice. So I'm excited partially because like this is just an excuse for me to kind of punish you for an hour about your work.
No such.
Nice. But yeah, so I'd love it if you could just talk a little bit about, I guess, I don't know, like musically what you've kind of been up to recently, just with everything.
Well, in the last year, actually, like since quarantine started, I endeavored to, and I do talk that I say things like endeavored, so excuse me for, I'm not trying to, this isn't even nerves, I'm not even feeling it, but like I was supposed to have Ben Greenberg perform, and I'll have all kinds of projects, just makes a record for me. And this would be a solo thing that I'd kind of been working on for a while. Not kind of, I had been working on it for a while, but just on the side. And it just turned out that like he ended up taking a much bigger role in the whole thing, which is great because I just gotten to this place of like, Kismet, don't do. Okay, sorry, my cat there might be some shattering of glass or something, but anyway, he had to kind of really take me on like as a project, not only musically but like getting me back on the road to like not getting stuck in analysis paralysis, which I think is hard not to do.
Sure. Yeah,
there's a in the and not knowing exactly what you're doing at all. You kind of I don't know if this makes any sense, but the more
perfect sense.
Yeah, so the more I was like, oh, y'all know how it goes. Like the more you know, the less you know that you know, or the more you know that you know nothing. You know what that?
Yeah, the better you get at your craft, the more you understand how little you know about it.
And how much like, oh, if I examine it from this, or like if I do this, or if I try that. But it got to a point where he had just blocked out time and I just hadn't sent anything. And I would just go missing. Like I would run into the woods and you couldn't get in touch with me. Like I'd been in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And then I was in Virginia before I got back to New York. So he ended up taking on a much more like in the driver's seat, sort of like, just give me what you have, Zohra, even if you don't think it's complete, which I felt like I just couldn't get to a place where I felt like it was complete. So I really, really credit his kind of stick-to-itiveness on me. And I really appreciate what I ended up getting out of it. And this particular project was something I'd done entirely on my own, which I say without it wanting to come off like chest puffery.
Like
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, this really not a vanity project. I'm gonna just turn up my light a little. But it just was something I kind of needed to do, because there were a lot of things that maybe didn't make sense for Azar Swan, and certainly made no sense for like previous projects I had. So I really loved the way it turned out.
The only other like Wi-Fi.
Something.
Hang on,
my Wi-Fi says it's pretty strong, so I have all my bars. I don't know.
Are folks watching able to? Yeah, are folks watching able to hear what Zora's saying? It doesn't matter if I can. It's just more I can't tell if it's my Wi-Fi.
Amita, who I've known since my sister just joined. Amita Singh, who just turned 40. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
I love you, Amita. I don't know how many kids you have by now, but it'll probably. Okay, Zachy says he can hear me.
Okay, good.
But yes,
I think it might be my Wi-Fi. I'm going to say darkness. Okay, cool.
I buttholes.
Yeah.
What buttholes is one of sorry, she just is one of my favorite people in the world, so it's fun to say hi. But
that's one of my favorite things about these, yeah, is that you get people like buttholes chiming in, you know.
Yeah, you're old too, but I never said 40 was old, my loves. Anyway, well, Caroline, how are you? I don't like these things to be one-sided. There's not.
I'm doing all right. Well, it's interesting because I appreciate the.
How's Dad?
Oh, I can't hear anything. He's good. He's good. He's in the other room, you know.
Well, yeah, so I'm really psyched on this, and Lydia Lunch is the only other performer on this record, and she does an amazing job. She just adds the kind of color that I couldn't do myself, so and personality.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was sort of interesting before my Wi-Fi shat out and I lost like half of what you said, but you were talking about sort of how like this started as something that you were doing kind of for yourself, not like as a vanity project, but just like it was a thing that you needed to work on. And you did clearly bring in like all of these collaborators. You brought in Lydia Lunch. You collaborated with, and you collaborated really heavily with Ben. But I thought it was sort of interesting when you were talking about like the way you approached the songwriting for this as sort of like more of like a thing that you needed to do. Whereas I know with Azar Swan, I know the songwriting process is also sort of obviously necessarily different, like sort of a little bit more of like a back and forth.
Yeah, like this was, you know, to be honest, I think some of these demos started off with Josh saying, "There's not anything I can really do with these. Like, they feel very finished." And I thought to myself, like, you know, like there are these sort of, like, I'm a huge fan of the record. I still love the kind of the journey of having like this almost like a gallery show of like 10 pieces that sit near each other and how they interact with one another, and the kind of the cohesiveness of a record rather than like, you know, one tracks here and there, which I think is great to do. I think people should release music any way they can. But if you're going to endeavor to do a project that you want to do, you may as well do it to this. This is Kismet.
Hi, Kismet. Yeah, you got cats.
I know, it's like it's like the first time anyone's ever gotten cats. That's how excited I am. She's a polydactyl, so she's got little hands.
That is definitely a very good cat name.
Yeah. She did not like that. She was like, "Don't show off. Don't exploit me."
But yeah, no, I've also been like itching to talk to you about the solo record too, because the last time I saw Zach, he was like, dude, you've gotta, like, you're gonna love it. It's so fucking good. So,
Yeah, I mean, Ben did a great job. He was fantastic, and I feel like I had some good stuff for him to launch his wonderful kind of ear and his skill levels. He took what I gave him, and God bless him, made sense of it for me and hopefully for everybody else. I mean, I was, but I wanted to be like in a place with it that I didn't think I would get to. So that's it all. It's hard to explain. It's like a nebula that you don't really know what it is that you're going for, where you want it to go, but you know when you get there, and it just,
yeah.
thankfully, like I just said, I put my trust in you, Ben. Do what you do. And he actually said to me, he's like, a lot of people say that, but they don't mean it. I end up like giving them something, and then, but I was like, no, like I said that, and I went,
Yeah.
go with God, and it's really, I'm really psyched on it, and I can't wait to like,
Nice.
I'm doing the artwork with Lydia and this wonderful artist, Jasmine, who's a photographer that does all of her stuff. And so, from there, I'm going to have my Iman, my beautiful niece and graphic designer, to help me kind of create.
That's handy.
Yeah, so it's a kind of a family, small family affair. So, but yeah, it's right now I think the working title might be Murder in the Temple, but we'll see.
I like that.
Yeah. So, and then there's some stuff going on with Azar Swan.
Yeah. Well, because while I was like doing the whole like binging interview kind of thing leading up to this, I revisited that interview with the Grammy website for Hissing the Paper Crane. And I like.
Oh, okay, great. I thought you said a granny. I was like, Grammy. Yeah.
Yeah. And they like in it, I think you guys mentioned like that you were working on other material as well. So.
Yeah. We have like a one other member that we've been working with, that we did a single for Adult Swim with him, and it's a live bass player. So we have some.
Oh no shit.
And I just am so. It's like I'm the first person to ever get cats, and I'm the first person to get a rhythm section. It's pretty. He's really great. His name is Ed, and I'm really psyched on what like we're gonna like finish this record like almost in a way of like the band does it like live. We're gonna go like we've already jammed some of this out before, but like finish it in a not sort of like Frankensteining it,
Yeah, like sort of the back and forth.
Yeah, like little pieces and parts from this will be like a complete full-bodied thing. So I'm excited. It's got a lot of ass, which is what I call rhythm is ass for me.
I feel like bass is a particularly good, like, if you're gonna say that something's got ass and you mean that it's got bass, like that's.
It really does. He's great. He's fantastic. He's like in what we call in the pocket player. So like you have like with Vara, which is Josh's other band that he has with Toby Driver from KO Dot. He's like a completely different kind of beautiful player. Actually, someone just pointed out that bass has the word ass in it. I don't know completely. I never thought of that. Thank you, Juan. Yeah, so he's like a beautiful melodic player, kind of almost like Mick Karn from Japan or something. But this is like, yeah, just like more in the pocket, like minimal, kind of what the song needs, and like not too many flourishes. But we'll see. Actually, it could go a different. Bob's going wild. Is that Ashu? Sorry, when I see people that I know,
You're totally good.
I talked to him forever. It's hello. Fob's Gone Wild. I love some of the Instagram names of my.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, so it's just been a pretty busy, but not so. I don't know how to explain. I'm sure everybody has a kind of fever dream of a year.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, like,
family records.
yeah. Well, also it's interesting also just because like each, like going back to Azar Swan for a moment, like revisiting that discography, it's like really interesting to like watch how each album kind of becomes something like fairly different from the next.
Very, very much so. I don't like to retread any kind of ground if I feel like that gets not just same, yeah. But like I don't know, it just feels like once you've done something, if the pendulum swings in a direction of like, well, what would excite me, or what I reckon might excite somebody else, like-minded folks, but within the same with the backbone being obviously, yeah, us, and not just like completely all over the place, but just trying to find like different directions to take a vision. Plus Josh and I are just really like, we've always been so we just are very excitable when it comes to like things we love and how we want to explore. And then, yeah, a different kind of like kind of contrasting like textural colors. It's like putting things together that maybe hasn't been treaded a million times before.
Yeah.
And not just for that reason only, but I think if you're like, I don't want to do like Civil War reenactment, like trying to be like, you know, I talked to Lydia Lunch about it. I'm like, you know, yeah, cop your haircut, but the other stuff, it just, I can't cop the rest. So if I want that energy, I'm going to need you to do it. But yeah, so I try to within what feels like isn't cosplay, like, yeah, challenge myself, but keeping it grounded with just, yeah, whatever, you know.
Yeah. Whatever. And Juan, you would be very surprised. Yeah, someone in the comments was just saying that they didn't think that Josh was a very excitable person based on photos of him that they've seen.
Well, that's a part of the artistic output, my loves. He's a voracious like reader, and he somehow like he has the kind of, and I definitely don't have this kind of fervor for listening to music the way you would when you were like 14 or 15.
Yeah.
Like he can, and you know, Zach is this way. Lots of people I know, and I love that.
Yeah, Zach is the same way.
And it's great because it keeps like, and they also get excited about, and it's helped me kind of be excited about people I know. Like they turn me on to folks that I'd be like, oh, if I saw them at the bar, I don't know, am I gonna love their record the way I would love something when I was a kid and I didn't know who, that kind of distance. Yeah. The mystery of not being, of the obvious, the mystery of the unfamiliar, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I like that. It's kept things like, I love also being in spaces with people whose work I really truly like admire, and they're also just like shooting the shit at like, whatever dive bar on that particular day. We'll say TV. Shout out to our friends
down at TBI. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably the last time I saw you guys in person.
Oh yeah. It was a while back. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like God, it was January or February, but it was like sort of the looming specter of everything.
Yeah, it was my birth. I had my birthday there, a month and a half before everything just kind of got the way it got. So, so
Yeah.
we all know, and I'm hoping that, you know, I'm hoping that this is the last leg of my face is a little puffy. I've been crying. Like
Yeah.
I lost a family member today, not
I'm so sorry.
COVID, and she lives in Scandinavia, lived in Scandinavia, and they didn't take it quite as seriously as we did here. And she had, and you know, it's really fucking sucks. So I'm over it. Caroline, I'm over it.
It fucking sucks. It's infuriating. And it's like, you know, I think to your point when you're talking about this as like a fever dream of a year, I think whether you were busy or not, like I think the process that everyone's had to go through of like dealing with what the fuck is going on, like if
Yeah,
you're busy or not, that's a lot to kind of handle and carry.
definitely. Uh, so I just want to send everybody love, and if they've lost anyone or have had, like, you know, people are also like, I tend to be a little bit, I keep a small circle, like strangely, I know people who live in New York, the idea of people who live in New York City, it's like this, what folks reckon to be like social, like super gregarious, this and that, but I can be very like homebody-ish, and like I have, you know, weeks of just when I'm feeling particularly really anxious, I have like bad anxiety sometimes.
Yeah.
I keep to myself, but I know that folks who you know, who are very social, you know, extroverted folks who thrive off of being around others and going to shows, which I also think it's like it's
Yeah.
a big part of our existence and culture that's missing right now. And
Yeah.
obviously, you know, one of the places I miss is like St. Vitus, and those are, I have a little corner I go to because I'm short and I toddle over there, and I feel like I can watch, and I'm safe, and you know, there's always friends, and just it's sad that hopefully that'll start to like invigorate itself, and I don't know when, but
Yeah. Hopefully sooner rather than later. And, you know, if you haven't gotten a vaccine, get one, please. You can walk into any location now. You do not need an
I
appointment.
have done it, and it was really it. You know, they said that second shot that they say one might. You know, I had an hour where I felt a little chilly. That was the worst of it. So
Nice. Yeah. That's not that bad. But yeah, I guess one of the other things, like, I think one of the things you were talking about earlier with like, you know, being around people who are like really enthusiastic about art and music, and like, you know, being around people who are like making cool art and whatever, and they sort of like are able to like introduce you to stuff in a way like that, you know. One of the things that I thought was sort of like interesting is like, and I was reading a piece that you wrote for, I think, Slutist like a million years ago, when you were talking about a Marissa Nadler record.
I think that was Talk House, but
Oh, yeah, Talk House.
you need to go on Talk House, yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I thought was sort of interesting about it is you were talking about like how initially you'd sort of like not really spent any time with the work, like the rest of her stuff, because you were like, oh, it's like this. And then you like listened to this one record and you were in this sort of this interesting headspace. And that's sort of like I thought the way that you kind of approached that, and like, you know, you get to know people who are into things that are potentially different than what you were into. And they might make you like look at stuff a second way. And I thought that was sort of like an interesting way of like talking about kind of entering into like, I don't know, somebody's body of work. But that's sort of one of those things where like over the last year, I think that's been a lot of like my music listening. It's like,
Right.
what's the shit that I like wrote off because I had some particular like experience with it. And like one of the things to prep for this also is like I saw something where you were talking about a Kate Bush record, and like I always wrote off Kate Bush, but that one record is fucking amazing, it turns out.
The Dreaming.
Yeah.
I was told, I think you left a comment somewhere, that you went to that while you were like reading some old interviews. Yes, I, it's really easy to kind of think that you know what something will be based on other triggers. Which actually, you know, to take this conversation into a little to another space is something that I think with Azar Swan, we kind of almost hope to offset what someone might think by maybe visually trying to I don't know how to explain it, to you either visually or sonically kind of throw people's expectations of what this project is.
Yeah.
Beginning, I was using a really nasally, like pop music, circa early 80s, affectations of what a pop singer sounded like then, which is a particular kind of vowel sounds, how to deliver words in ways that like could, you know, I found it really funny when folks, and I say folks because it's, again, it's not like, it's anecdotal, but just like, oh, she sings, so that means that so and so writes everything.
Yeah.
Which is me. It's like, I kind of was like, oh, I'm flattered that you think I'm the beauty of this either way it's flattering. So either I'm right, you know, but it's all very reactionary stuff. Like I did, you know, writing, I think I, in the last like couple of records with Azar Swan and the solo record, it's that I no longer used things that I didn't like in music to dictate what I made. It was what I wanted to do without it being reactionary to how I found somebody playing light bulbs on stage really fucking annoying. Yet somehow folks were into that in the early, why, you know, and sometimes when you're too much in it as well, things like will get in under your skin in ways that now I'm like, oh, well, like with some like hindsight, and also just with this whole year putting things in perspective of like what matters and what doesn't. Let them play the light bulbs, or it's okay. But it's like when you work on a craft and you see it, I don't know. So like, perhaps if I looked at something and it seemed like, say, I love like mid-era Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
Like, Kissing of Summer Lawns, and like her I don't know, you know, strangely enough, I'm really like shit with record like song and record names, but the Don Juan's Daughter, something or other. I mean, but I actually love these records. I know them back to front. I just don't like what song was that. But with I think with Marissa Nadler, I don't know if it's Nadler or Nadler, but
I actually don't either.
Hopefully she won't mind him.
She's very nice, so probably. Like
I you know, talked to her a few times. She's a really talented, beautiful singer, and so I was like, oh, I would have, you know, strangely, I think like having Caleb put the record out, put it in a different context. I mean, I can't help it. I'm aware, and I try to realize like, oh, like these things are dumb to not, like you kind of go, you're on autopilot. So like, something's on CBS, I'm probably not going to watch it, you know, but
well, and there's so much fucking music too that I think a lot of people use these sort of categories and like markers as like, oh, I'm probably not gonna like that, so I'm not gonna like spend time on it, or like I'm probably gonna like this, so I'll like look into this. And I think people tend to overlook a lot of stuff for that reason. Like, and actually specifically with Azar Swan, I didn't listen to anything before Savage Exile because I was like, oh, it's like electronic music, that's not super my vibe. And then somebody played Savage Exile for me, and I was like, what the fuck, this is so cool. Like, this is like really heavy, but also like interesting and like complex. Like, so it was this whole like entry point for me with the rest of the discography, which was sort of interesting.
I that makes sense. I think Savage Exile is the first, those, like I said, the last few records were the ones that we made without having a kind of what we didn't like and how we wanted to react to something we didn't like, in the music, like making music kind of for like purely for the, like, what excites us.
Yeah.
Because it feels kind of like, you're in a kind of like being in a punk headspace, especially with Religious to Damn, like kind of trying to figure out a space for us with a different palette of sounds. So it kind of, by dint of just approaching it that way, like I could start with just like the purity of going into an instrument and writing with that kind of clear headspace and the intention of just making stuff that really we feel like moves us or gets to in the marrow,
Yeah.
I like this. The beauty is clearly Josh. Yes, thank you, my love.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like that also changes over time. Like you
Important
stuff shifts.
Yeah, they're very like unique, unique to each project and with the folks who are involved, and that's why it's exciting to have, as I said, the bass, and the rhythm section. Like we're like Josh and I went from playing with like 10 people to like paring it down, just because out of wanting to just create. And so how to do that best was I mean, I always wanted a band. I wanted to go to, like, it's just not really a feasible thing sometimes to get a bunch of folks together to be able to play shows outside of the city, even in the city sometimes. So yeah, like and so Savage Exile was like, it was the first time we had written music, just like I brought my songs, he brought his, and we were gonna, like, because initially I used to just bring him things, and they would be worked out like 60% of the way, and then we kind of build up.
Yeah. Well, initially the descriptions were also like Azar Swan is Zohra Atash and her producer Josh.
Yeah, that was kind of just an easy way of not having to, like, break things down song by song, but it was, but and as he said, and is important to kind of note, it's like it wasn't like bringing in like chords and a vocal idea, putting electronics to it. It was approximations of what I wanted the sounds to be. Having come from like just playing guitar and like playing like the Rhodes piano, I didn't have a lot of experience with like synths hardware. I knew, what, like, I knew like what certain Moog sounds were, etc., but I didn't know how to create. It's a lot. It took a lot. The learning curve. It took a while for me to kind of get to understand how to create sounds that I wanted to, like, with this hardware that actually is also pretty, like, it's pretty expensive, Carolina.
Yeah.
You got to drop like three, like you'll at least, have a couple thou just to have a setup that makes sense. But like, I have to say, using the like Behringers to sort of mess with things until you know that you want it, I think has been a great help.
I actually, at the very beginning of all of this, like I asked Josh for advice and got myself like a Behringer little guy.
Oh yeah, like I can't speak highly enough of it, because like I couldn't really like get myself to a point where I spent the money on something until I knew that I could use it. It's like important, like, or that it could be, it could function as something I could write with. And so I was down in New Orleans for a while, and Josh had kind of he had built up his collection, and I was able to take things that I'd written with soft synths and then process through different, like the Prophet, and just, you know, like there's quite a few that I use actually, but like the Vermona and all, just, and a couple of different Moogs, the DFAM, all of this, and it really made a difference. That warmth that people talk about, like I finally got it, but it took having to, you know, foray into all the different kinds of ways that one can kind of approximate a synth sound to understand the difference and where it comes to play, that kind of thing, how it would function live, that sort of thing.
One other thing I actually also wanted to ask you about, because seeing you guys live, I didn't quite realize also how, like, not complicated, but like your vocal setup is like a little unusual. Like sometimes you have like the double mic, you've got like different effects processors. Like I have no idea how to like parse what's going on other than holy shit, that's cool. But I remember like seeing you guys play with Doug, and Doug like immediately was like, I have to ask like every question about like the vocal setup.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I kind of really missed having like a tactile like experience live with that, like, because I used to bring a lot of instruments up on stage with me, and it does kind of change the experience as you're playing it. It gives, it's just a certain headspace that I would get into, but with the parts that I had written for this particular project, there are different textures. I've always been like interested in like extended vocal technique, and Doug actually does a really great, like, whether he knows it or not, I'll send him some literature on these things if he wants it, but and where the places and spaces he goes into with his vocals are not like what the like Western sort of choir training that one can, which I'm not dogging. I think I had that. Even opera training, it's to, like, the extended vocal technique was, I don't know if you know anything about it, but it was developed by this, I believe his name is Alfred Wolfham, but it was post World War I, and he had been in the trenches, and he needed to express himself, and he could not find ways to do that using the Western, like
because like the Western like choral tradition, it's beautiful, but it's very, like, it has a very, it's used in a very specific way, and like as like more of like a dilettante with this, like amateur, like it having been taught like in that tradition and like nothing else has made it like difficult to kind of wrap my head around like doing things in like a more organic way. And so like the extended technique stuff that you get into is, it's sort of, it's interesting in that way to me, because it also like demonstrates like a flexibility in terms of the way that you're able to think.
Yeah, it kind of dips into different folk traditions, so it's basically points of articulation and like where one produces sound. Now, if you take, for instance, the tradition that you have in India, which the classical singing traditions, they have a sort of the litmus of whether or not you're doing it well is by putting a candle in front of your mouth and singing, and if you blow the candle out, you're doing it wrong, which is actually the exact opposite for the Western tradition. Is like diaphragm pull, like breath out, like, you know, like mouth open, palate this way, that, like, and there's also a lot of like really silly words that people use, like the mask, they do this a lot. You talk, and I'm like, what exactly, these are things that you can't qualify to people because they don't have a way of even knowing what you're talking about, because it's not as if you can give them any point of reference outside of these magical, beautiful, poetic prose that people use for singing. So with like extended vocal technique, it pulls from different traditions, so and different points of articulation and placements, and so that type of thing, where then like stacking, like where you hear two different, like yeah. Well, why am I forgetting polyphonic singing, etc. Yeah. Where places where your tongue sits, and like, and I wanted to use these textures in the live show if at all possible. And one thing that I enjoy doing live is I strangely enough, like I have smoked for quite some time in my life, but I can hold a note for just like, it's not necessarily circular breathing. It's yeah. Whatever it is, I can't explain it. I've gotten to writing things down. So if I were going to teach this, what would I say? And actually, I do think folks can get a lot out of the Zen of Screaming. That
yeah. There's the Melissa Cross stuff.
She's actually wonderful. It's because she talks about things like, she's like, imagine if you were like pregnant and you were putting air in your, like she gives you a sense of like, yeah. Oh, or the way that you get to your what they call the so there's head, chest, and then there's the
mix, yeah,
mixed, and then so it's like, in order to get the sense, it's like telling people where the sensations are. So someone I like online that does who's taught this in a way that I think it really works, is like, imagine you're talking like a princess, so you're kind of, it's where you actually can find the place.
Yeah.
So having these the two different mics, I can sort of, like, for instance, I do have this TC, this particular guy is very, it's fun. I use this every now and again, but the one I use is the VT3, and that has like a vocoder, and but I don't use a vocoder actually, like, but it has this really I think in a way that you could almost like mess with the live, like an instrument. Yeah. You can take textures that you do with your voice and give it more color and density and stuff like that, and I can hear it, and I work off of that to kind of keep, like, because I don't use an in-ear. I probably should, and one day I will. It just feels like a lot of work. You get something molded to your ear. I have a persnickety ear as well, because I can't use those ones that Apple give you. Like, one of my ears spits it out.
I know. No, they're so uncomfortable.
So it's one of the, and also I like the live room, like if I'm not, I say this having only tried once, and I know that folks who are converts, that are like, oh, like, it's the best thing ever, but I need to feel like I'm in the live space with folks, even at the detriment of not necessarily, like, I use the floor to reference a note. The reverberations of the note off the floor, then I know that I'm not completely, I don't know. I feel like
you're like a bat. You echolocate your notes.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm so used to playing shite clubs, as they say in England, like, or not shite clubs, but like places where aren't
smaller places. Like
smaller places, maybe like little dives here and there, to where, not St. Vitus, actually, that's a phenomenal place to play live. But yeah, so you have to get used to what, shake what God gave you. just and keep it, like, the sound guy is not going to want to probably deal with like if I left it all up to those external factors. I have to have ways that, like, and so having that kind of the pedals and the second mic, and being able to just also know that if one thing cuts out, I have something else to use, because basically it's so vocal intense.
Yeah.
So it has to be there.
Someone's noting that it's a good thing that you're not playing with drummers, because your ears would have been destroyed by now.
I play with 2 drummers actually, but no, I mean, I don't put my I don't go right to the kick drum. It's like it's closer to, like, if a monitor isn't being completely like trustworthy, it's like it's almost like they call it the sajda in Arabic. I don't know, when you put your head down, like a yoga pose. So it's like very, yeah. I mean, this I know people think they see this and it's kind of like almost like showboaty, like, oh, that's like what Mariah Carey does. Yeah. It does help though.
Because it guides some of the.
Yeah, because it basically, if you, it has to be placed a certain way, but you get it's not like if you cover your ears, that wouldn't be helpful. You need to know what the sound of it, the note being out into the air, back into your ear. That's why singing with cans, when people record records with the headphones, it took me ages to like get used to that as well. That's probably another thing that that hump that I got over with the last few records, is just like, I so hated the process of singing into a microphone for the record, because it's just the most unnatural thing. Yeah.
Like in what capacity though? Because like, you mean like a recording mic, or like just any
headphones on
okay.
The microphone, like whether it's a condenser or a dynamic mic, it doesn't make a difference. It's more of the reason why I wouldn't want to use an in-ear is because having the studio headphones on while singing is, particularly when you're first also getting used to singing into a microphone. So if you watch like someone like Sinead O'Connor doing Nothing Compares to You, she's kind of doing what they call not condensing, starts with the C. I don't know why. Like compression. Sorry, compression. So in the louder parts, so it's like, it's been 7 hours and 15. So it looks like kind of like showboaty at first.
Yeah.
But actually, it's a necessity, because it's like the whisper, like compression in recording takes all of the dynamics of the quiet and the loud, and it makes it sound even.
Yeah.
So I didn't know this. I didn't know fuck all about record. Like I've been learning this as I've gone. I'm like, why do, like, this sounds like shit. For Religious to Damn, I sang quietly. I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to sing quiet. So I just like, that's, you know, I know that sounds like, I just was like, I could not like figure it out within the amount of time of like getting a studio, like understanding it. So I just was like, you know what, I can do this and create the kind of mood I want to with more quiet vocals. With Azar, Swan, the first 2 records, I just stood very far away from the microphone. So I was just, so Savage Exile is kind of the first time I understood these dynamics and figured out how to not have a record that was at the mercy of my limited knowledge of recording. So Ben actually, when I was working, he was like, why didn't you just go into a studio? I was like, you know what? Why did I think that? Like, sometimes you get like having somebody else outside, like, you know, Josh actually made a point to kind of like not have any input on this solo thing, because it's like just new blood. And some of the questions and just like, I felt like absolutely like, just like I'm like, I have absolutely no idea. I went through a whole dissertation, and he's like, what, you can just come into a studio? I'm like, and that's all, folks. Yes.
Right, but also at the same time, I think like okay, like coming at this from a like okay, from a purely selfish like self-centered perspective here, I'm justifying my own shitty habits. Like sometimes you manage to like stumble on something that's more interesting in that process.
Yes, but I didn't. I didn't. I stumbled on how to cut corners, and I say this with a lot of like I feel like sometimes people talk about every piece of work they've done like it's like this precious like thing from a manna from heaven, and it's not. You know, sometimes I done just messed up. You know, I don't regret what Glass Prayer sounds like. That's the first Religious to Damn record, and Dance Before the War and Blow Us a Kiss. There are parts that I love, but I'm like, if I had just like not, why right up until this point and then get to a place where you're at the finish line and you're like, let me just like sit this one out, you know, like I just let all of that particular care I put into things just like, and actually I think that's probably where my doing things from a space of what I don't like in music, I was able to kind of justify the like, well, I'm just going to sing with a kind of nasal affectation, like pop singer, and just it'll be annoying, but it'll be funny, you know. Like I definitely like found like that space, like I created from that space, thinking that like you know, Fox and Grapes, like I
Yeah.
you know, some kind of Aesop lesson in there. But so definitely like a Savage Exile on and Hissing of a Paper Crane, which I loved also having uh folks who I really admired like come in and put their voice to it. And I played like this drone machine synth, like that was like, it was a lot of fun, like to just be able to make like I felt like I actually got to a place with synths that I could do that and sit back and just create just like little landscapes, or if you will, for other folks to put to color with their, you know, I mean, and the Doug stuff was so amazing. It was just like, how do you do that? Like, it's amazing to hear live too and stand.
Yeah. It's bananas. I don't understand how anybody does any of the extended technique stuff, let alone like repeatedly.
I know, really, to not lose, like to do that and do it from a place where you're not gonna like, where you're not just wrecking your instrument is really, it takes a lot of, you know, you it's people sometimes like, it's strange. People's kind of and I say people, and I'm not speaking to everyone obviously, but like there are for folks who just sort of they approach voice in very strange and unique ways. Like for instance, like I've talked to people who have lost their voice or have gotten polyps, just teachers,
Yeah.
people who do speak, like who do public speaking, and I'm like, why don't you take some vocal lessons? And it's like, oh my god, who would want to hear me sing? It's like, well, that doesn't mean you're going to book your first show. Just what? And also, and like very few people can't sing, you know, like very few people are completely tone deaf. So I'm like, it's a very strange like, I don't know, I'm like, it's hard to explain. I'm like, well, no, you can just work on your craft.
No, I mean that it's something that I think just in general, like the way that we like approach the arts, full stop, as like a thing.
But people take a guitar and say, I didn't sound good the first time I picked it up. So I mean, maybe there are folks who do. Sure. Voice is like, oh, like it's like, well, you don't have, you have to be willing to hear yourself sound like, because there's,
you have to be willing to fuck up.
Yeah.
Also.
There's a lot of components, but again, because also voice instruction doesn't have quantifiable, like, okay, like, you know, you do have to describe things sometimes through, like, I don't necessarily agree with some of the, like, the verbiage. Like, I don't think people know what their diaphragm is. I don't think people actually know, like, the breathing is important, but only to an extent.
Yeah.
So anyway, like, there are some really great folks on YouTube who explain, like, why something works and why something doesn't vocally, and I think it helps me kind of hone in also on the verbiage that throws people. But yeah, so like the voice is definitely, it's an instrument, and that it takes, like, sometimes folks think like someone just kind of gets up there and they have the natural talent, and then, you know, it's like, no, like almost everybody, like I did an interview with Mish, that Mish from White Lung, and I talked to her about, like,
Yeah,
how much of this is like you're working on your craft, and a lot of it was also like Zen of screaming. It's
yeah,
really important for folks to kind of get the right
yeah.
the right tutelage.
Yeah. Well, no, and I think, like, when I was speaking about, like, how, like, the relationship with the arts, I'm honestly, like, really just thinking about, like, people will be like, oh well, I can't draw, and I'm like, yeah, but have you practiced? Like, did anybody, like, teach you
Yeah.
some shit, like, to look at? I think that's sort of like a similar thing with voice, where people will be like, oh well, I can't sing. It's like,
Caroline, I said that about my drawing. I'm like, I can't draw. So thank you for pointing that out. That I
you don't know, you just, like, haven't spent time, like, doing it in a way that, like,
I think it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I don't have the energy to spend the time on it. I'm just not good. Good. You know, like, that's probably
yeah.
where it
Well,
is.
it's the same way that people are like, oh, I'm not good at math, and it's like, no, it's, like, not a thing that you have. Well, like, some people have a natural aptitude for it, but, like, you know, it requires also some, like, practice and stick to itiveness.
Exactly. I mean, and that can be difficult to, like, especially now, like, with like the way that we're built to kind of lose. Sorry.
No, you're
Drawer. Yeah, I'll show you sometime at a bar. I do a great forward-facing flat dog.
hell yes.
But yeah, but it's about, like, when there's so much, like, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, and then you have a phone where you can kind of, you can, like, I'm fascinated with how younger folks, how they come about their kind of their kind of journey into, like, music, and how they collect records, and what, like, so with the ability to hear more and then understand the pockets of how things interrelate, how, like, do they listen to the whole thing, to a whole record, and then it's just like how people take things in. So I think listening to music, and I was getting to a point, and then I read a comment. I got, this is exactly the point of how one keeps their focus.
Yeah.
I love it. So it takes, like, kind of working on, like, you know, watching someone play, like, who plays bass really well, just work on this G scale at 72 like BPM, and then it's like, really, I wouldn't do that, just because I only because I don't have the desire.
Yeah, if you don't have the desire to spend time on it, then, like, it's, you know.
But I definitely, like, I think with voice, it's like it's I love being able to channel, like, emotionally things that I guess sometimes doing these interviews, I learned something about my motivation for something I've written, or why, you know, like, even just having, again, like I said, Ben, who's like, why didn't you go to a studio? It's like, you know what? Thanks for asking that question. It didn't occur to me before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I work sort of coming up on time. I don't want to keep you too much, but I do really appreciate you taking the time and sticking through my Wi-Fi problems.
Well, and
So.
I had fun, and I'm thanks to anyone who listened, and I hope I can't wait to see y'all in the flesh.
In the flesh. Yeah. Cool.
And
And I'm really excited to hear whenever it comes out. I'm very like no lie, Zach was like really talking it up. So
I love it, and I appreciate that, Zach. I appreciate Ben, Josh, Ed, everybody who is my family, y'all, for just it's always been a small affair, this thing I do. So I appreciate y'all a lot, and hopefully I'll see you very soon.
yeah, fingers crossed. All right, be safe. And for everybody who tuned in, I'll be saving this as well as the first part on the IGTV tab. So if you missed something, tuned in late or whatever, it'll be there. So
Good night.